In this video, we'll show you how to replace the inner tie rod on your Subaru Baja. This is located in the front of the vehicle and part of the steering system. Let's get started. With the vehicle raised and supported, we can remove our lug nuts with a 19mm. If you can't remove the wheel, you can thread a lug nut back on halfway. And I'm going to use a dead blow hammer on the back side of the tire, trying not to strike the rim. And we can remove the wheel. We need to loosen this jam nut. We can use a 19mm wrench for that. Normally we'd need to remove the cotter pin. This one's pretty rusted in here. If you need to, you can fold up the ears. In our case, they're pretty much gone. And just put the socket over the ears if you need to. We're using a 19mm. I'm just going to thread the castle nut back on a little bit. Now we're going to strike the knuckle right here near the tie rod. Be careful not to damage anything in this area though. You can go ahead and remove the castle nut and drop the tie rod down. As we go to remove the outer tie rod, you want to count the number of turns as it comes off. That way when we put the new one on, goes in about the same place and it's easier for the alignment technician. 1, 2, 3, and so on. 8, 9. Now using a 13mm wrench, I'm going to hold the inner tie rod, and then using a 19mm socket, we can remove the nut. Now I'm going to use a set of long-handled needle noses. We'll pull that small clamp off. Now I'm going to grab the bottom lip of the inner portion of the boot and pull that off the steering rack. Now we can shimmy the bellows boot off of the inner tie rod. To remove the inner tie rod, I'll be using a special inner tie rod tool. You can certainly use just a big wrench or a set of pliers for this. It certainly helps to use the inner tie rod tool though. With that loosened up and our inner tie rod tool removed, we can go ahead and thread that off of the rack. Before we install the inner tie rod, it's good to clean where the inner tie rod will install into the rack. I'm just going to use a little brake parts cleaner. I'm going to use a bore brush. We'll get the threads nice and clean. And then I'll use some air just to clean it out. We have 2 notches on the end of the steering rack. You want to line those up with the 2 notches on the washer on the tie rod. We'll go ahead and get that started in. Get those notches lined up so that the tie rod can fully bottom out. Now we can go ahead and snug this up. We'll just tighten this to the best of our abilities. Now I'm going to use a punch on the washer on the inner portion of the tie rod. We need to fold over 2 of the ears to help hold it in place. We can remove the nut on the inner tie rod before installing the bellows boot. It's good to add some silicone paste into the ball joint of the tie rod. And then also going to put some on the shaft of the tie rod itself. That way the bellows boot slides on nice and easily. Now that we have the bellows boot most of the way onto the inner tie rod, I'm going to turn the wheel to the right. That way we get the innermost part of the bellows boot closer to the steering rack. It'll be easier to get on. With our bellows boot on the steering rack, I'm going to use a cable tie. I'll get that started before I slip it over the tie rod and over the bellows boot. And we'll get that into the steering rack. Then I like to grab the end and twist it. Tighten that up. And twist the end off. If you need to, you can use a cable tie on the outside. In our case, we're able to reuse our clamp. Now I'm just going to use a little bit of anti-seize right where the nut and the outer tie rod will install. You want to make sure that that's threaded on far enough so that your outer tie rod can make it all the way on. And line up your outer tie rod. We'll start to spin this on, counting the number of turns just like before. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9. Bring the nut down to meet it, and then we can get this into the knuckle. We can remove the nut from the outer tie rod. Line that up with the knuckle. Our new nut has a nylon lock washer on the inside, so we have no need for a cotter pin. Now we can go ahead and tighten this up. And we can torque this to 20 foot-pounds. We'll go ahead and tighten down the jam nut. Now we can get the wheel back on the car. Line up the lug studs with the holes in the wheel. I like to get the first lug nut threaded all the way in, and that'll hold the wheel on while I get the rest of the lug nuts threaded on. We can snug these down. Now we can torque these to 80 foot-pounds in a star pattern. Now you're going to want to take the vehicle for a test drive down to your local alignment shop.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.